My name is Jana Klanova. I am coming from Masaryk University in Brno. In case you never heard of Brno, Brno is the second largest city of the Czech Republic, halfway between Prague and Vienna. And actually is the city that is very similar to Graz. It's also the second biggest city. It's also the university hub with 6 public and whole bunch of the private universities and about a quarter of the population being the university students. It is also an interesting technological hub with a lot of money from the European structural funds invested in the last 10 years, also interesting industries. You may be surprised that majority of the production of electron microscopes in the world is coming from Brno, as well as majority of the antivirus softwares is also coming from Brno. So this is where we are from. In my presentation, I would like to show where the idea of the EIRENE infrastructure came from and say a few words about the RECETOX research infrastructure that I am heading, then also how it fits into the current landscape of the research infrastructures, a few words about EIRENE as such, and then potential synergies. So I said I'm from Masaryk University, Faculty of Science, Research Center for Toxic Compounds in the Environment, which is RECETOX. RECETOX 2 years ago was successful in the widening competition of Horizon 2020, and together with University College London and ETH in Zurich won the title of the European Center of Excellence for the Human Exposome Research and the funding of 30 million euros for the next 7 years to develop the concept of the human exposome. And one of the partners of the teaming project is also BBMRI, because building the European EIRENE infrastructure was actually one of the goals of the teaming project. So both BBMRI headquarters and University of Graz are also partners of the teaming project. In the picture, you can see the major philosophy of the scientific strategy of the center and the teaming project, which is linking the healthy planet with the healthy cities and sustainable societies and the health and well-being of the humans, because all three are very closely interlinked. And this is also the idea that is behind the whole human exposome research. The RECETOX Center has 5 research programs, but it also hosts the RECETOX research infrastructure that is for more than a decade. The RECETOX research infrastructure is already part of the national roadmap of the large research infrastructures in the Czech Republic. The oldest core facility of the RECETOX infrastructure are accredited laboratories, and they've been developed almost 20 years ago, focused on the targeted analysis of toxic chemicals, both organic and heavy metals, in all environmental matrices. Later, we expanded to analysis of bio samples. Then we expanded to metabolomics and proteomics, and then also non-target analysis later. We are now looking not only into the metabolomics, but also metagenomics, epigenetics, and all the other omics. The second infrastructure that we developed was the monitoring networks, because we started collaborating with United Nations Environment Programme and WHO on development the harmonized international monitoring networks that would contribute to the effectiveness evaluation of the international conventions that are supposed to protect public health from the toxic chemicals. And then once we started looking more into the human health, we also took responsibility for several ongoing and some newly recruited population cohorts. So our CELSPAC population study platform hosts now the grown-up CELSPAC birth cohort. We are recruiting the next generation birth cohort, but also hosting happy aging cohort that was recruited already 20 years ago in the Czech Republic, Poland, Lithuania, and Russia. And of course, that required building also the new laboratories for handling of these biosamples, as well as the new biobanking facilities. This is where our partnership with BBMRI, both national and the European hub, came from. And of course, throughout our history, we had to invest a lot into data warehouses and the platforms. We developed the national systems for hosting and presenting data from environmental studies, which became the model for the UNEP global monitoring, reporting, and then we extended it also to kind of Exposome platform, linking, sensitive data from the cohort studies, biobanking, laboratory data, and then the data repositories. Since the beginning, since we first sent the application for the national roadmap in 2010, we had a funny feeling that there is not similar infrastructure at the European level. Most of the national infrastructures are being organized from the top. They are spinning from the European ESFRI infrastructures. We had to go the other way from bottom up because there was no European infrastructure that would be concerned with the toxic chemicals, their toxicity, human exposures, and such. So this idea slowly grew up and was shaped up. And then in 2017, we decided to put the first bid for ESFRI. I should also mention that the important feature of the RECETOX Center and research infrastructure is really the close relationship with the applied sector, both with the private institutions, but also with the policymakers. We serve as the National Center for Toxic Compounds of the Czech government, substituting the Chemical Risk Agency. I already said we are working for UNEP and WHO, and in the last couple of years, since we are very active in the human cohorts, we are also working with the South Moravian Innovation Center and the regional authorities on development, something we call Brno Living Lab, which is a close collaboration between the regional authority and other stakeholders in really spreading the knowledge and making our scientific knowledge more available and ready to be used in the policy making at the local level. I don't have to dig very much into what is ESFRI because majority of you are very well known, but if there are any people from the HEAP consortium that are not so familiar, when we are talking about research infrastructures, we are talking about any type of research that can be useful for future development of excellent research, being it facilities, chemical laboratories, data resources, computing capacities, archives of any type. And then talking about ESFRI, which stands for European Strategic Forum for Research Infrastructure, this is the body that is mandated to support the coherent and strategic development of the European infrastructures. Their very important activity is that every few years they update the European roadmap of research infrastructures, and they are coming with the ideas for the future strategic development. And this is where we were heading to when we submitted the first application for EIRENE infrastructure in 2017. We were not successful back then because the community was not really matured enough, but we helped to identify the gap. So already in 2018 roadmap, this is the citation from the landscape analysis saying that the human exposome infrastructure is clearly needed and the proposal will be welcome. So then we again submitted the application in 2020 and we were successful. So EIRENE research infrastructure is part of the 2020 roadmap that was launched last December. When we were developing the scientific concept of the EIRENE infrastructure, of course, the core of it were the toxic compounds and the measurement of human exposure, development of the laboratory approaches for assessment of the human exposome. But that's just the first element, the first pillar, because to enable the top-down and bottom-up exposomics, it means really linking the exposures both to the sources of exposure factors, but also to the human health and population health, we need to develop monitoring studies, both environmental and human cohorts. We need to bring data together. We need to build the data warehouses for the health data, clinical data, exposure data, whatever. But we also need to build the new tools for interpretation of such data. Joachim already showed the platforms for integration and harmonization of the data, but we need to go beyond that. For example, we need to consider the mechanistic toxicology, because if we are talking about thousands of chemicals that are in the toxic mixtures we are exposed to, we also have to find a way how to do the evaluation of such toxic mixtures. And then we have to work with adverse outcome pathway concept. So when I'm talking about the interpretation of the data, it includes adverse outcome pathways, pharmacokinetic modeling, epidemiological models, and many other ways that can be applied to really link the exposures to health. So thinking about that, we also contributed to the development of the practical concept, how the human exposome should be developed, how the whole platform should be developed, because exposome is clearly the missing piece. When we are looking at the interactions between the genotype and phenotype, the exposome type is the third element that needs to be considered. So we really have to rethink the concept and think about something we call functional exposomics as the counterpart of the functional genomics that has been developed in the last 20 years almost. When talking about those pillars in this picture, you can see that while we still have the laboratory capacities in the center of our attention, to the left, we are also showing existing infrastructures that we would like to collaborate with, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We really want to use the existing capacities of the environmental infrastructures like ICOS or ECTRIS, or the health infrastructures like BBMRI or ECRIN. We are already closely collaborating with Elixir on building the data evaluation tools. And we are very open to bring more members of the EIRENE consortia and closely collaborate. In October this year, under the Czech presidency, we will be organizing the International Conference of Research Infrastructures in Brno. And as a side event, we are organizing the joint workshop of EIRENE and those neighboring infrastructures to really discuss the overlaps and synergies and potential collaborations. So I hope to see some of you in Brno, and you are very welcome to attend also this side event and take this opportunity to help us to develop the exposome concept. It is important to look not only to the center of this picture, but also to the bottom and the top of the picture, showing that the very crucial element of the whole implementation of the whole exposome concept is really development of inventories of existing resources, cohorts, networks, data, inventories of the laboratories to get prepared for federated analysis of available resources and data and metadata. And this is something that is already happening within the EHAN projects, but also other European projects. And it is very important to start working together now. We also need to communicate with the user communities and use scientists from EHAN, from EUREON, from PARC, from HBM for Europe, and other ongoing European projects are very important user communities. So we really need your involvement. We need to discuss what will be the future scientific vision. We need to share the scientific area, but we also need to discuss practicalities, like which country wants to develop which expertise, because we definitely don't need to have everything everywhere, and also what are the most important central services that are usually related to harmonization, QA/QC, and these elements. This is the picture taken from the 2021 S3 roadmap, analyzing the landscape of the chemical infrastructures. And you can see that EIRENE is already mentioned plenty of times. That is really becoming the infrastructure that bridges existing gaps, because analysis of the chemical exposures is as important for the infrastructures dealing with the quality of air or water or soil or food, that the exposome element is now introduced into medical and clinical studies for respiratory diseases, immunomediated diseases, cancer, and many others. So it has been widely recognized that establishing the EIRENE infrastructure was a good move forward. So currently, in the preparatory phase, we have 17 national nodes bringing together more than 50 individual partners. We also have partners from US and UK, and it is open. This year, we got the first European project financing the preparatory phase, so we will be working on all scientific, organizational, and financial concept, but it is the open concept, so it means all of you are welcome. We have the national hubs in many countries, but many are still missing. If you are interested, please contact us, and we will put you in touch with the coordinators of national hubs, or we'll be happy to develop your national hub. I was talking about synergies with ongoing EHAN projects, but many of you might be also familiar with the new Horizon Europe partnership on chemical risk assessment. You probably noticed that Horizon Europe introduces this new tool of European partnerships, and PARC partnership was actually the first one that was officially launched last month. And it composes of 9 work packages, and actually 2 of them are infrastructural. One of them is looking into the infrastructural capacities, laboratories, monitoring networks, cohorts, and it puts a lot of effort into inventorizing those capacities. And because this partnership will be there for another 7 years, it is also one of the ways how to make the outcomes of the EHAN network more sustainable, because some work can continue in frames of the PARC, and again, I'm sure many of your institutions and countries are already members of the partnerships, but it is again open because it builds on the national hubs, and national hubs should be open also to the partners who are not officially partners of the project. And there is a work package 7 that is focused on fair data. So a lot of future work that can also bring together the outcomes from all 9 projects can be done there. Last week, I was in the EHAN meeting in Barcelona, and one of the topics that was discussed there was that the 9 projects is happy to do more joint work, but they didn't really plan enough resources for these kind of activities. Some did, some didn't. I think the PARC is the way how to bring additional money, additional resources to our joint efforts. So Joachim reminded me today that we met for the first time almost three years ago when the European Commission was officially opening the 9 EHAN projects, and they brought me there as a representative of EIRENE because they were very much in favor in development of this future European exposome infrastructure, because they are very much aware that we should start building something more sustainable than the projects, and they are hoping that this underlying infrastructure would help to protect, develop, and further use all the resources that will be developed within EHAN. So here I am back, reporting on how far did we go in the last 3 years, and again, extending the hand towards your consortia and welcome you to join us in this new effort. Thank you very much.